Hi there. I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Very pleased to welcome you to today's session, which is entitled From Zero to Hero, Strengthening Data Security with Zero Trust and SASE. Your presenters today are Dan Gregory, he's VP of System Engineering with CBI, and Yuval Sarig. He's a Channel System Engineer Manager with ForcePoint. Now, before I bring this over to Dan and to Yuval, let me give you a little bit of background on what they're going to talk about today. The lines between internal trusted entities and external untrusted entities are blurred. They don't align with the idea of a single defensible boundary between internal assets and the outside world. A modern security strategy that incorporates zero trust enables you to meet evolving security challenges with an agile framework for authenticating users and devices while protecting sensitive data. The 2021 Cost of a Data Breach report found the average cost of a breach for organizations without zero trust is $1.76 million higher than it is for those with mature zero trust deployments. So join us and find out how to move your company left of breach with zero trust and SASE and develop a seamless path to growing your security capabilities when and where you need them. A little bit of background on my organization, Information Security Media Group. We're a 15-year-old global media and intelligence firm. We're based in Princeton, New Jersey. You might know us best by one of our 34 media sites. These include Bank Info Security, Healthcare Info Security, and Data Breach Today. In all, we reach an audience of 950,000 security leaders globally, and we give them a daily diet of news, analysis, research, events, and educational opportunities just like this one today. Few notes of housekeeping. If you have any questions for Dan or for Yuval during the course of this session, you can submit them anytime via the chat window that you see on your screen. If you should encounter any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, please take down the email address. If you write to webinars@ismg.io, we do have technical support staff standing by to help. Also, I need to mention, today's webinar is copyrighted material, which means it's meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you'd like to use any of the information presented today, or if you're looking for customized training materials, please contact us independently. Thrilled to introduce our sponsors today. CBI is a trusted cybersecurity advisor to many of the world's top organizations. Founded in 1991, CBI provides innovative and customizable solutions to help ensure data is secure, compliant, and available. They take on an advisory-led approach to safeguard their clients against the evolving threat landscape, providing comprehensive visibility into the maturity of their security capabilities and addressing gaps before they can be exploited. They're dedicated to the relentless pursuit of mitigating risks and elevating cybersecurity for companies across all sizes and sectors. ForcePoint is the leading user and data protection cybersecurity company, entrusted to safeguard organizations while driving digital transformation and growth. Their solutions adapt in real time to how people interact with data, providing secure access while enabling employees to create value. And now let's meet our speakers. Dan Gregory is VP of Systems Engineering at CBI. He leads a team that combines service expertise with product solutions to develop a strategic security roadmap for CBI clients. He's responsible for vendor technology review. He's got almost 25 years of experience as governance, risk, and compliance management professional. He served on the executive team for several large enterprise organizations in manufacturing, retail, financial, legal, and insurance. Yuval Sarig has developed his security career within ForcePoint, starting from an inside sales rep. He has developed and honed his security skills from sales to system engineer. He now manages a team of system engineers that help guide customers through the ForcePoint solutions that are built to protect modern enterprise, including data-first SASE, data loss prevention, secure web gateway, and next-generation firewall. With that, let me welcome onto the virtual stage here, Dan and Yuval. Gentlemen, stage is all yours.
Thanks, Tom, for the generous introduction. Yuval and I have something planned out here today. We're going to be conversational about something, a great many topics. And as we created this presentation, we thought we'd have this kind of a little bit more casual, conversational led It's going to help us relate to more real world situations and the topics that Tom was outlining there, those being SASE, zero trust, remote workforce security, and several others you're going to see that are underpinning crucial aspects of this. But let's start off by telling you why we're here, right? So as in the Matrix, some of you guys might be familiar with this screenshot here from the movie. We're about to go on a journey. We're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, right? Taking that red pill and finding out where it takes us. And I'm going to interview Yuval on a lot of topics. But first of all, what we're here to do basically is talk about this new concept around the remote workforce, the human-centric model, and the behavioral modeling and analytics that we need to now shift into to maintain that visibility as our workforce goes from more of a traditional, workforce mode, I'll call it, where we're going to a building, we're working with others face to face and in teams and such, to where we're now a little bit more independent. And we're having to maintain that same level of visibility, monitoring, tracking, and analytics. So, Yuval, I'll let you throw in your thoughts there, and we'll kind of just go back and forth as we get down through the deck here.
Yeah, I think for the first time in forever, we can all agree it's been a crazy last year and a half. And, the cybersecurity space has been incredibly volatile due to that. After all, we've had just about every enterprise have to shift their mode of operation and then potentially shift back and eventually finding themselves in the middle ground where their security tools have to accommodate the best of both worlds. So I hope that we get to talk a little bit about that. We get to talk a lot about what really that paradigm shift has caused and how we all have started to work, honestly, a little different. And what does that mean for us in terms of cybersecurity?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're definitely going to get down into all that fun stuff here. So let's get started.
Awesome.
All right. We're all creatures of habit, right? What we really wanted to do is to establish the fact that we do have patterns. We do establish behaviors. We are creatures of habit, and we like that path of least resistance, right? So as this image is showing, we're not going to want to go through security checks any more than we have to. We're going to find ways around them. And this is in good times, in normal times. 4 or 5 years ago, when we were going to that office again and working with those teams, it was easier for us and administrators to kind of keep us in check, and for us to kind of follow that path that they wanted us to. It was a little easier, right? Still, users did find ways around those checkpoints and such, but it was a little more top of mind. Okay, we are in the environment physically, which changes your mindset and how you work and how you act with others. Now we've kind of gone all to our own little corners. We have to self-police to a certain degree, but then that path of least resistance means something completely different in this new work mode that we're in, right? So they're going to find ways around those checkpoints and gaps and stuff, and things that they're not doing maliciously, the end users, the people who are supporting the processes and operations of our organizations, but they're going to find them. Okay, they're going to find ways to work more creatively because they're not in those same environments. But this basically wanted to underpin before we get started, we're creatures of habit. And it's all about monitoring, and not in a bad way. I think monitoring gets a bad stigma assigned to it. We need to do that for the betterment of the security and risk management when we're looking at what our users are doing on a normal day-to-day basis. So then we can either support that or maybe encourage them to do it a slightly different way while maintaining that security and risk management. So Yuval, what have you seen in the last 18, 24 months as a shift as it relates to that story, that path of least resistance, and relate that back to behavioral monitoring and the topic of the presentation here, if you could?
Yeah, no, I think that you're bringing up a really good point, and I think it's critical that we discuss the psychology of it all before we can even touch on the solution, right? Like, let's address the elephant in the room. We've all moved to a work from home scenario. Some of us may have been accustomed to that because we've been on, we've road warriors, we've been everywhere, but some of us have not. Some of us have had to shift that mindset and be in a situation where not only am I home, but my kids are home, the wife is home. Like there is suddenly like the settings in which I am effectively supposed to do my job has changed dramatically in the last year and a half. And we got to, I want to break it down. I want to break it down to better understand what that impact has on the psychology of how I interact with corporate assets, with sensitive information in general, And what does that mean? No longer being in an environment where I don't have anyone around me but myself. So, right, the ability to self-govern oneself, how does that really influence? So when we talk about the path of least resistance, the way I see it is, now that I am in this situation, I'm going to try to do my job perhaps in the most convenient way possible, because outside of that, I'm also juggling home, like, helping the kids with school from over Zoom, and maybe doing the laundry, maybe running some errands. And all of that really forces the user to kind of find better and more productive ways to conduct their role. Now, where is the challenge with that? Well, security doesn't really operate that way, but the very nature of the business is reliant on like every person in the company effectively being productive and supportive of their role. So, I think that because of that, security has had to change a focus. Like nowadays, I'm no longer in the office. I have no one looking at me. Therefore, what I'm doing and outside of this window that is my Zoom, that is my window to the world, right? People have been kind of a little bit more laxed about it. They're not really concerned about whether or not they're going to be judged by their activity, or maybe if I cut a corner here or there. I mean, in the end of the day, I get my job done faster. So how does that portray to one's desire to have an effective DLP program, or an effective kind of behavior analysis system that will be able to identify risk within the organization? I think we should talk about this real quick, because I think that really highlights the gravity of the situation, but B, whether or not the current tools are effective in solving this problem. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. I think overall, we were pleasantly surprised, and I guess the royalist I could think of, all the organizations that we work with, who come in contact with, and you and I talk to hundreds of them every week, every month. We were surprised on the whole, where people just want to get their job done. They're not going to take advantage of a system now where they're not in a building, they don't have to be watched over and everything else. They just want to get in and get their job done in the time and place and manner that they want to do it. And productivity, I haven't heard of it, any productivity decrease. If anything, we got more focused because we needed a normalcy blanket, right, to hold on to while the rest of the world was kind of losing its mind. Like, work is normal. It's a happy place. It's my security blanket. So let me do my job. And you guys in security, just, you try to keep up with us. Well, this is a conversation about how we're keeping up. So I totally agree with what you said. And that work-life balance conversation, I think we can actually move forward and start talking about that a little bit more now too. So let's add that to the mix, right? And what you were touching on there a minute ago is, and this slide is perfect for this. This is a pandemic. It's not a productivity contest. What we're trying to get at, and laying down the foundations for the technical components of this presentation, is let's keep in mind that we are definitely not here. We are not, as IT cybersecurity specialists, a risk management specialist, or what have you, to worry about the productivity of the end users. We need to enable them, to give them the tools to do the job and secure them and secure the data and information around all that. But we never really saw that dip significantly like we thought we might have. But what are your thoughts on this one here? Because I think that's pretty much says it all for you.
Yeah, no, I think productivity is a byproduct of the company culture, not the tools place to force a user to actually do their job, right? In the end of the day, if I'm part of an organization I believe in, if I do something meaningful, I'm going to stay productive, because this is how I bring value to the organization that I spend so much time. And you talked about, like, now that we're working from home, it's really the lines have blurred as to where we spend our time, and like, do we walk away from can we even disconnect, right? But that's the thing. Because of that, we've come into this weird situation where the work-life balance is now this weird gray area. And because of that, I think that the mindfulness around security has dropped, because it's not top of mind. I'm either doing my job, or I'm doing my job at home with the other responsibilities that I have. We already have had a crisis of, is the workforce even security aware? Now you take them outside of the office setting that really influence one's awareness of their behavior. and you take them in their most comfortable and convenient place of them all, their home, right? So does that mean that their guard is down? Most likely. Does that mean that the security stack that maybe one has in the organization, in the office setting, it can be replicated in the home situation with my, my ISP provided router and all that? The truth is no. So how do I overcome this? What can I effectively do to identify risk? Because again, like you said, it's not a productivity contest, but I have to take into account the fact that all of this mixed bag of environmental circumstances is really influencing one's tendency to do their job in a secure way.
Yeah,
right?
100% agree. And as security professionals, our job and our task is, and this we'll shift maybe gears a little bit more now into the technical, but the job that we're tasked with is still the same. We have to make sure that end users, either accidentally or maliciously, aren't doing things with our intellectual property we would not have them do or not want them to do, right? The way we do that is we need technologies now that are borderless, that do not exhibit any changes in the way that they operate based on whether or not they're in the cloud or they're on-prem. We have to have that visibility now all the way down to the new endpoint, which are the human beings. It's us. We are now the last and final stopping point, endpoint, if you will. We've all heard that before. This is nothing novel that I'm saying here today, but it becomes very germane to this topic, I think, in that we're dealing with things like human-centric and behaviors, right? That's right in the title of this. We talked about it on the first slide is, so how do we do that? What technologies have you seen or demands on vendors such as ForcePoint and their ability to adapt into this model in general, I guess, and specific, I'll just say not just ForcePoint, but I'm seeing a lot of things like those vendors that are able to adapt to that cloud-centric, borderless model, focus on the human beings and their behaviors are really leading the charge. And those are things that we want to see more of because that's really all we have left to monitor. We can't always control what endpoint they use because they're going to do what they're going to do. We can't always police the fact that it's secure, that it's it's sanctioned, unless you go that extra step and make sure that you get technologies in place to ensure that that is the right laptop and that's the right user and all the identity pieces that go into that, which is not something that all organizations can do. So you're really left with the human being, like what are they doing with our data? So talk a little bit about that technology. I'll transition here through slides as you kind of walk us through that, but what have you seen in that area, the space, the DLP, SASE, zero trust type of conversations?
Yeah, so I think there's two main factors that I think have been playing a key role, and when they actually converge, that's when it gets really interesting. So on one side is the zero trust framework, which I'm a big proponent of it, right?
Same.
Especially in the circumstance of working from home, having the kind of path of least privilege as an access point, rather than just once you overcame like any kind of authentication challenge, you have the keys to the castle. And now that you're behind the moat, you can effectively do whatever you want. So having a zero trust framework that basically is a constant challenge of your activity and ensuring that should anything were to happen, I have a way to basically restrict the area of effect within my environment, right? So in other words, you got in, well, that doesn't mean that you can effectively use that same key to access all of the assets.
Okay.
And that's been absolutely critical to adopt.
Yeah.
The idea of me being able to access my enterprise network from home, that's a vulnerability unto itself. But the fact that once I'm in, I can access it all, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
And then in conjunction with that, I think the idea of incorporating some level of behavior analytics as a way to really identify anomalies, basically track that and being able to kind of put weight into risk so that eventually that plus the access control kind of merge together and become a situation where, sure, I'll let you in, but if you were to behave in a way that could compromise or pose any risk, then I'm going to basically remove that ability for you to really cause any harm. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what is behavior? Like, how do you basically impose behavioral restriction in the work from home situation. We talked about the path of least resistance, but now I'm going to have to enforce behavior. But we agreed that the behavior within home is different than it was in the office. So what is the standard? Right?
Yeah.
So that is.
Yeah.
Sorry, go. You want to?
Sorry, I love where this is going, and I did want to go back to what you said and just kind of recap the journey. First step is we have to verify the user is who they say they are, regardless of what they're using as an endpoint or what mode they're using, tablet, laptop, desktop, whatever. So that zero trust component, it's easy to say it, and we've heard this ZTNA acronym bounced around a lot. But I think it needs to be defined a little bit more, because you set that up as the first step on the journey. Totally agree with that. Are you who you say you are? That's part of that lowering of risk journey, right? So if we're starting at a 10 level of risk, we have to assume everybody is a bad guy until we verify they are a good guy. So it'll take that 10 down to an 8 once we have technologies in place that says, yes, this is Dan Gregory logging onto the appropriate time, the appropriate equipment, perhaps across the proper channels, right protocols, and we will let him in the first door of the house, to use your analogy, and you'll have a certain set of keys that you can then use to get into rooms that only the rooms that we want you to get into. So it's that verification of identity through zero trust network architectures that has to go into place. That's that first and crucial step of the journey. And then you mentioned the next one is user access. User access management, UAM, is okay. That's what issues you the number of keys that you're allowed to use to get into certain rooms within the house. That's a whole nother set of verifications based on your identity and the applications and or services that you should have access to, no more and no less. That's another set of verification. And we're still just letting you and welcoming you into the foyer of the house. You haven't done anything yet, right? The next one is what are you going to do with the data that we've given you access to? You've been allowed into, the kitchen. What drawers can you open? Can you open the refrigerator? Can you get into certain parts of the kitchen? And then what can you do with that stuff? Can you, what kind of, stuff can you whip up and make in the kitchen with the ingredients that you've been allowed to access, or the data you've been allowed to access? So it's all controlled. And every one of those steps that you outlined is a critical piece of the journey. And I think underpinning it, which is where I think you were going to go next, is all those things establish patterns. We call them behaviors over time in the IT security world, right? We want to know, when is Dan knocking on the door? When is he getting his keys? What applications is he launching, and when? How often? What data is he coming in contact with, and how often? What is he doing with that data? And who's he sending it to? All those patterns start emerging over time, and we can use that to great advantage, because the obvious thing is, and I want to bounce this back and forth with you here, is the concept is very simple, but I think it needs to be stated here. Bad guys will exhibit different types of behaviors, no matter how good they are, how they got your credentials, or how they found out where the doors of your house are. They still have to somehow look and act like us, which is extremely difficult if we have a finite, granular level of behavior monitoring that can detect even the smallest whisper of a different type of behavior and put that into a bucket. And then once that scale tips, because there's so many tokens in that one side of the scale, it should trigger something as an event saying, this really isn't Dan. Something's a little bit off. What are your thoughts on that underpinning behavioral piece, which again, I think was where you were going to head before I kind of jumped in there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Digital impersonation, I think, is one of the biggest challenges, right? Like,
yeah.
First of all, you authenticate yourself, but how do I really know it's you? If somebody were successful in hijacking your credentials or managed to go through whatever challenges I've set in place in order to give you access, now what, right? That's why being able to compartmentalize the access, so that based on the indicators of behavior, I can look for an anomaly that would insinuate, hey, that's actually not there. Right?
Yeah.
Since when is Dan trying to pull all this data out of this server and do a data dump in the middle of the night? Even though he's using all the right credentials, and by all technicality, his role does give him access to this. So being able to have the right framework, and this is why I think the zero trust framework is so critical to make the other piece effective, and vice versa, right? I think they really go well together in being able to effectively have a way to break down what I can and cannot access, and have very clear ways in order to stop it should there be a situation where there is some sort of anomaly. So to
Yeah.
that extent, not all indicators of behaviors are indicators of risk, but being
Yeah.
able to really like basically extrapolate that one behavior plus another behavior may be an indication of risk is where it's critical, and being able to not either raise the alarm, aka finding that gold nugget before it becomes basically being able to differentiate this outside of all the noise that we all get as security practitioners. And then from there, being able to investigate not only the activity, but the behavior that led to it. And that, I think, is something that really is critical in any kind of attempt to solidify a system that will be able to do both.
100% agree with that on that one. I think it gives us a good opportunity here to go and sprinkle in something else. We've mentioned it by proxy, but not directly, is the secure access service edge components. So you did a great job of talking about the zero trust network architectural pieces. We used the house analogy, verifying, giving you keys, letting you into certain rooms. And all those are steps along the journey from more traditional zero trust network architecture. We don't trust you at all. We're going to verify you every single step of the way, confirm and make sure that it is really, truly you and you're using the right apparatus or device or whatever to do these things. That's zero trust, right? We have zero trust. And we're verifying everything. Trust nothing, verify everything. But the secure access service edge, I see this as, and I'll give you my take on it in an analogy, maybe you can bounce yours back to me, is I see the secure access service edge as the vehicle upon which all that travels. It allows you to connect those points to each other in secure ways, first of all, in encrypted channels, making sure that that traffic is at all times encrypted. It also gives the enablement and ease of access in a secure way to those users. Now, those employees are working remotely or wherever they want to work on whatever device they want to work, and enabling that to technically happen. That allows that tablet or laptop working at a Starbucks or in a home office somewhere to connect to the network in a way that looks and acts and smells and walks and talks exactly as if they had gotten in their car and drove an hour to their physical building or wherever they used to go, 2 years ago or so. So that's kind of the way I see the SASE as an opener, just a general kind of broad stroke on that. The web gateways, the client access security brokerage, the software-defined wide area network topologies that you can design. All those are components of SASE, and you may choose to use some or all of those depending on what you need. But I see that as the road upon which zero trust travels. What are your thoughts?
I would agree. I think, SASE was a logical evolution of the cybersecurity trends as a whole, as well as what, how to consume these tools effectively. But I think definitely the pandemic was a massive accelerator to the adoption of a system, or a converged system in this case, that would effectively, the way I see it, be able to equalize the playing field. That way, whether the organization is back to what it was, like you said, back into the brick and mortar and everybody working from an office setting, to people working remote, to everybody being forced back because who knows, another variant or something else, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge was that we couldn't effectively dictate the same level of visibility and policy enforcement and control once that shift was forced upon the majority, if not all, the marketplace. And so now what we've seen is kind of like this arms race from all the vendors attempting to basically build an effective tool, but the underlying need is still there. I need a solution that is flexible and customizable enough to accommodate my needs, whether I am in this side of the spectrum or that, as the organization has to adopt and do the most important thing, which is business continuity, right? And so I think it all ties effectively to being able to have a good way to control the enterprise, no matter what shape or form it takes. But what I've noticed that is not being a big kind of point of interest, not point of interest, but point of kind of development, is really having that as part of any organization's attempt to control their sensitive information, to really control how data flows within the enterprise now that everybody is everywhere, right? And this is something that I've been very passionate about, is, well, what happens to your DLP program if everybody's working remote? And how do you effectively control what needs to be controlled when everybody's really going through the path of least resistance?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great segue to the next slide, actually. A concept we riffed on this one for quite a while, and it's quite simple. As we've all seen the analogy of the castle with the moat and the drawbridge and the buildings inside the walls, and they all got a name and they all relate back to certain aspects of network security traditionally, and that model's still alive and well, right? I mean, that's not going to go away for a while, but we've seen this huge transition. To your point, Yuval, the pandemic accelerated certain initiatives that companies were already looking at, were on the verge of, or maybe for them, it was just, it's on the horizon, but it was getting closer every day. And along comes the pandemic, and it threw a lot of us into the, hey, we got to get smart quick on digital transformation, going to the cloud. I have literally heard customers, and I quote, say, we are getting out of the data center business. Close customers of ours are saying that, or something close to it. It's happening. And if they're doing it, there's a lot more that are doing it. They're just not telling me that they're doing it. So what does that mean? It's like the castle model's alive, but now we've got a lot of little castles, basically. They have to operate independently. They have to be empowered with the same technologies, the visibility, the reporting, the control, the monitoring, the assistance, the support. It all has to kind of fan out. And the best mechanism to do that, obviously, is through the cloud, through services-based models. And then that DLP component and all the other topics we're talking about here come along for the ride, right? So how do we do that? So this is kind of going to open up the conversation, I think, for us to talk about how all that works now in this new era that we're going into. Some more aggressively than others. Some of them have been here for a long time already. They're like, hey, jump in the water is fine. But that's a smaller percentage, I think, at least the ones that I run into. So talk to us a little bit what your thoughts are on how that model impacts, like we'll pick specific topics here for a minute, like data loss prevention, DLP. What does that look like, for example, in this new model?
Right. So first of all, I would agree with you. I think the castle and the moat model is no longer relevant. Like, I mean, it's relevant because you'll always have kind of a central hub, but to that extent, the fact that we've all become so accustomed to consume technology in a kind of cloud way, everything is available to me through every device and every system. Because of that, as a user, as an employee, we demand this out of the tools that we have to use to conduct our work. And by doing so, we basically bypass this entire model. So how do you become effective, right? So here's the thing. DLP is incredibly good when it comes to the very clear knowns that I don't want it to happen, the very clear knowns that I don't, I'm okay with. So like everything that's black and white, like obviously I'm going to block you when you do this, and I'm going to let you do this. However, the biggest problem is everything in between, and that gray area has only become more and more complex in accordance to how we operate, right? And that is where I think it is critical to incorporate that piece around behavior as a way to really enforce your DLP. So rather than going with a stagnant DLP solution that is a go, no go system, having the versatility for that DLP system to effectively be influenced by your activity today, as well as your activity that led to that behavior, right? So being able to have more of a dynamic influence on what I can and cannot do. Because here's the thing, like again, tying it back to the path of least resistance, we're going to have people attempting to do something in a different way because in their mind, this is a better way to do the business. Well, or to do whatever their job function is. We could highlight this as a broken business process, or we could highlight this as an opportunity to become more efficient. Well, in the static DLP world, that person will never really have the capacity to find another better way to do their job because we're just going to block it. But in the kind of next generation, if you like, of how to approach DLP, well, maybe I'm going to make that a possibility for them if there was zero precursor activity that led me to feel like this person is in any way, shape, or form of any risk to my organization. And that's applicable everywhere, whether it's in my home, in the office, on the road, at the client's office, etc. And that is in many ways thanks to the modernization of, infrastructure as a service, the modernization of security tools, the fact that we're moving into a converged SASE platform, and the fact that now, as long as I have a way to capture that behavior and a way to capture that traffic, I have control over it.
Yeah.
And that is exciting.
That last bit that you said really just kind of tied it up for me. So what's old is new again, right? So if you're old enough to remember green screens and mainframes and such, we all went to that thing to get our job done, to do our job. It served up everything. We just had a dumb terminal basically on our desk, and then you unplug it, it would just be a paperweight. So now that old model sort of is taking place again, and there's a rebirth of that concept, in that everything's a service now. The computer's on our desk in my home office right now. Yeah, I can do stuff locally, but if I'm not connected to the internet and using services and sharing data and collaborating with others, it's really not what they're designed to do. I can do offline work. Eventually, my point here is I have to connect to the mothership, run it through services that my company owns and can monitor at that point, to your point, pass through that SASE layer. So all that can be monitored. Is it approved, not approved, and that kind of thing. And then on to wherever it's got to go, or wherever I have to go to be productive. But it's kind of like a modernization of the old client server model, or it's being served to us. It's everything as a service type of concept is really what I start picturing. And that's okay, because that's where we get eyes on the traffic, eyes on the behaviors when they connect into their services and they pass through our virtual, old school single castle, so to speak. We can control the horizontal vertical through a SASE type of model. And that's what really helps us to not get in the way of productivity. I always said that when I was managing teams, a good day is when no one else in the company knows we even exist, but everything's secure and there's no alarms. We're doing our job, they're doing their job, and we're just there working together in harmony. So we can do that by not impacting productivity through the SASE models in the cloud. We can still control what we want them or would prefer them to do and not do to protect the the intellectual property of the company and their customers and everything else. But we should be unseen and unheard and just monitoring that behind the scenes. And that's just how I think the vehicle and the pieces have moved. But it's like what's old is new again. The concept should be pretty familiar to those who've been in the industry for a few decades. It's all cyclical, right? It comes around over and over again.
It's true. I mean, in the end of the day, we don't want to be disruptive to the ability for the business to continue to grow and do what it needs to do. It's a juggling act between productivity and security efficacy. And,
absolutely.
I think the modernization of the tools and in collaboration with the digital transformation really is kind of making it to some degree a lot easier in at least overcoming that gray area. Again, the black and white are easy. They've always been easy. I know for a fact that I don't want you to take that information and put it on the USB stick. Fine, that I can do. But what if there is some part of it that I do need to be able to do for some reason or another? How can 100%. I effectively, enforce this in a more intelligent way? Which is
I think one thing that kind of worth pointing out here on zero trust. One more thing is the advantages are no longer just solely for the organization. And I think a lot of employees will start thinking that it's like, it's the security stuff. It's serving to the company and only that, and in that direction, it's one way. They're just trying to protect them, and I don't gain any benefit from it. But the zero trust components now have extended into if organizations want to adopt this type of model, and I'm an employee at an big company USA, and I log in every day from my home office. I got zero trust going on. I sort of know what that means maybe, but I see it as a convenience because I log in, maybe I've got a single sign-on thing going on where I just log in once and I can just automatically click the buttons I need to do my job, and great, awesome. And I can do everything I need to do from the convenience of my own home while I take the kids to school and feed the dog. That's awesome. Great. That's how I see it. But personally, I've seen them actually extending those services into, okay, we're going to protect your identity beyond, because you're probably using your corporate email, although you should not, in other areas of your personal life, like for your login for your personal email and Gmail or whatever it may be, your banking login ID. We can tell them not to do it, but they do it. We see it all the time. It protects those identities as well, and it can be extended into that. So there's a benefit, and I'm seeing more vendors think that way and how to push that out to protect the identities beyond just the corporate, so to speak, quote unquote, identities or, work or use cases, because it's a benefit. It comes back to the organization as well if we protect their identities at all times or give them the ability to sign up for those types of services and capabilities. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I'm seeing a little bit more of that attention being paid by the vendors to do those kind of things. They've been around for a while, but I've seen an uptick in that, especially within the pandemic. I did want to bring up that last slide here. So let's pull all this together, right? And this is the one we're going to get down into the weeds a bit, but it is a delicate balancing act of many parts that generally don't look like they fit together to put all this technically together. It's the stuff that Yuval and I have been talking about. We're talking hypothetical at a high level, and we know that it's by design. This would be a 4.5 hour long presentation if we got down technically and did demos and everything else. But conceptually, each one of these rocks on this cairn here you see pictured is meant to represent a piece of those things. We talk about zero trust, DLP, user access management. Talk about SASE, CASB, web security gateways, on and on and on. All of those play a part in this balancing act that you have to build. So I want to put it back to you, Yuval, and say things like, for example, let's talk about the inherent thought process that customers will sometimes think about is like, oh, that blew my mind. It sounds way too complex, or I'm too small of a company. Why should I have to worry about any of these things? It just looks like too much. I have a staff of 1.5 people, blah, on and on and on. We've all heard those conversations before. So help us with the complexity. Like basically, if you were the customer, what's the first thing you would focus on to get your toe in the water of human-centric behavioral-based modeling, zero trust, and some of the other concepts we talked about here? Where would you put your time, money, and effort?
That's a loaded question. I think, and this is a little peeve of mine, is like, before you go research who out there can do what you need to do, firmly establish what you want to do. Like how many times have I been in conversation where there is this idea that this is what is like, there's just this concept in their mind that they need to protect X, Y, and Z. But what that looks like, what is good behavior versus what is bad behavior, like really ironing it out in terms of your own assessment of how you would like to even approach this problem. And then, and only then, do I think, okay, well, I've outlined that this is the type of information I'm looking to protect. These are the things that I'm looking to secure across my enterprise. These are some of the gaps. Now, the idea behind the SASE platform is that it's supposed to be much more consumable. It's supposed to make it a whole lot easier for me to not have to spin any VM, not have to like have any kind of dependencies on whether or not my architecture is mature enough to accommodate these tools. The idea behind it being a SaaS offering is to really make it kind of to a point where here is all the tools you would effectively want or need, and it is up to you to decide which of them play a key role in enhancing your security posture. And when it comes to DLP, I think one of the things that really we're seeing a lot of momentum around is really consumers or customers looking for a way to add sophistication to it, like moving away from the dependencies on, do I have that predefined policy? Do I need to start wrapping my head around the right regex that can do that? Or do I fall into this weird kind of, I have 100 policies active because that's how I'm approaching the problem, like solving the problem.
Yeah.
And really moving to a behavioral based model helps a lot, because to some extent or another, your approach to data loss prevention becomes more associated with, is there risky behavior tied to that activity? And if there isn't, then there is a good chance whatever has happened was a result of somebody trying to do their job, or somebody trying to effectively, just operate, or mindlessness that could lead one to, utilize, DLP as a way to educate the workforce on what they can and cannot do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is a big question. I know I was kind of setting you up there. I would agree with that. My response to that would be, having been on the other side as a customer and working with executive teams for many years, is we always had to stop and consider the culture of the company that we were, part of. How will this be received? What do we already know about how users are actually currently accessing and need to access, when they need to access, what they're doing, what they're not doing? So we generally had a pretty good idea already sort of about the culture and how these things would be adopted and used. So I think you kind of have to, a part of it has to consider that. And then I immediately agree with what you said, is define what the problem is. Don't flip it and let it run you. You are the dog and it is the tail, not the other way around. And what I mean on that is, sit down and classify your use cases. You don't need to be technical to do this, but we always highly recommend you include elements that might not always make sense. Purchasing, legal, HR, finance, the rest of the executive team, all those major components, because they are going to be the beneficiaries of this system if you do it right. And they have to speak and have a component of that. So then they can feel ownership over it when it does get turned down the road. Plus, you'll learn a few things down the road that you probably didn't know about your own organization in most cases. I think IT people tend to forget that sometimes. We get into a bubble. We're given problems. We go to our room, we try to fix it, and then we come out thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread. And they're like, no, we are going to reject that. And there's reasons why. So spend time with those teams, develop those use cases. Ideally, we would like a system that quite simply keeps our most sensitive data from falling into the wrong hands, either accidentally or maliciously. Okay, great. Problem statement, very high level. Let's break that down. What does that mean? Well, first of all, we probably need to identify what our sensitive data is. So usually in the beginning of these types of zero trust, DLP, SASE, whatever it is, conversations, you have to define what truly is important to the company. That shrinks your footprint a bit, and it shrinks the problem. It takes it from this overwhelming, where do I even begin thought, down to, okay, I can eat this elephant one bite at a time. And it turns out this is really all we care about right here. Not the entire universe. I just care about 1 or 2 planets, right? So let's shrink that down, define what data is important to us, what types of data. Then you can start defining, like to your point, Yoval, who needs to access this data? Who should be able to create it, modify it, move it, email it, or not? What are our trading partners? Who should we be able to trade with outside our 4 walls or our fiefdoms with? And define all those rules, very high level, non-technical. That's why it'll be okay to have this conversation with HR, legal, finance, and other non-technical people, because they'll be able to have a normal conversation around those first few steps like you outlined, I think. Then you take all those and you throw them into the IT guys' hands, and then they can go to town and say, okay, you need something that can do all these things. I can work with this.
Right.
And then once you define your data, I think, just to get very finite for a minute, very tactical, generally most organizations I see, once they identify their data, they risk rank it, they usually start with something easy, like, do we have multi-factor and single sign-on? Do we have that? Can we turn that on at least and get that little cheap low-hanging fruit out of the way? And that will dramatically help you with other things down the road. But I see a lot of companies default to the MFA, single sign-on piece, because it's easy to knock out, and it makes a huge, huge impact.
It's a good starting point. It's a great starting point, to be honest. I memean, bringing back to your analogy about zero trust and the kitchen and what drawer I can access, if you don't define that, like okay, so I've allowed you in, but now what are the drawers that you can access?
Mm-hmm.
And then within it, what do I want you to be able to modify or change or take with you, and so forth? Like, these concepts have to be defined before you go look out for the right vendor, in my opinion. You have to have a clearer understanding of what the end goal looks like, at least in some broader degree. So that way, when you do speak to a vendor or a consultant or any situation like this, they can actually act upon your needs to simulate and demonstrate to you how we would be able to solve this with this tool set, versus really trying to figure out what that would even look like if you don't even know what you need, right? And so I think the elevated expectations will always be out there, but doing one's due diligence is always critical.
100% agree on that one. So I think that's another great segue for us to like, okay, now that we've either hopefully didn't confuse you too much, but at least we let you know the components, where to start, how to start wrapping your hands around these concepts, why it's important, the benefits of it in this current state of, where the world we live in currently right now. And we've answered some of the bigger high level questions. The next natural question will be like, well, okay, great. I feel like I've been given a loaded gun and I have no training. What do I do with this thing? So call Yuval, contact me directly as well. You can see my email address down there. We will respond very quickly. We'll help guide you through the process. Okay. We are very consultative in our approach, as you've probably heard here today. I think we said the word force point like twice. Yuval and I are cut from the same stuff. We love to talk about the concepts and the process, procedures, and organizational things first, and helping you define your use cases. What's important to you? What'll work? What won't? And temper it all, of course, with cost and budgeting and everything else along the way. But we can help you on those first steps and then maintain kind of guidance and support throughout the entire process. Some of these things will result, I almost guarantee you, in not either ForcePort or CBI being the expert in a specific step along the way, but we can help get you to the people that will help you out. And then we can then continue down the path at a later time. So it's a big journey. We don't expect you to take the whole thing by yourself. And here's how to contact us. We're very active on social media and all of those things. So please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you guys early and often on this. Yuval, I'm going to add anything else before we kind of wrap it up and hand back to Tom?
Yeah, no, if any of what we said kind of triggered your interest or your curiosity, please reach out. Again, as Dan said, this is just can lead to a great conversation, can lead to a great, discussion about the needs and ideally a solution, but it doesn't have to be that case, right? So in the end of the day, I think, our desire to help is greater than our affiliation. So to that extent, I'm here. I know you are. We've been working for a while. It's always great to talk to you, Dan.
Yeah, likewise, Yuval. Well, with that, Tom, I'll put it back in your capable hands.
Beautiful, Dan. Yuval, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time and insight. Terrific conversation. So thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts today and to lead this wonderful discussion.
Great. Thanks,
For
everybody.
attendees, I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate that this took a chunk out of your day. We're grateful that you took that time and spent it with us, and hope that the insight you got from Dan and from Yuval will help you as you make decisions in your organization about zero trust, about SASE and other issues. I look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming events. And until then, for Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you so much for giving us your time and attention today.